Ted, forget that game we're playing right now. I got a whole new idea.
Bad DMing.
Sweet, 3rd level spells. Lehman's Tiny Hut, here I come.
I'm sorry, Dave, but I don't allow that spell in my game.
Bad DMing.
All right, I got my brand new 1st level character, an Aarakocra Archer, ready to go.
Ted, there is no freaking way I'm allowing a 1st level character to be able to fly.
Bad DMing.
You walk into a smoke-filled tavern, the bartender looks your way and yells from across the room, "What will you have?"
What? No funny voice? No interesting character? No description? Are you even trying?
It's just how I do it, Ted.
Bad DMing.
Today we asked the question,
Is it just bad DMing?
welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today, as always, I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Hey, maybe this is your first time hanging out in Ted's basement with us. It's a place where we like to share news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Sometimes we talk about other role-playing games.
If you don't want to miss a single video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
All right, this video is actually inspired by an email that came in. So, Ted, you want to read that question?
Sure. So it says, I am new to playing D&D in my current D&D game, the DM has changed the campaign 7 times in 2 years. We play every other week. I feel like this is bad DMing because he has changed the game without the player's concern.
All right, so there's a bunch of stuff in here that we can kind of unpack, but the biggest thing, a lot of times what comes up in, on the internet, on social media, even, our own comments on our own videos is, this accusation of bad DMing. And we see it happen really quick, I feel like. And first of all, I just want to say that anyone that goes to the other side of the screen and takes the initiative to run the game for other people, I think they deserve a little bit of leeway. Instead of just accusing them of bad DMing, let's remember that there's other players at the table as well. So we're going to unpack that a bit in this video.
Absolutely. First I'll jump in and say that, as you say, it's a lot of work to be on the other side of that table. And unless you've done your share on that side, you got to pull the reins back on the bad DMing because it's really challenging, especially when you're new to that side of the table. And if you've got no other options, then just keep your mouth shut.
Like for this particular question, I would say, instead of saying, is that bad DMing, have you had a discussion with your GM to try and unpack and understand why he keeps restarting the game? Is it something the players are doing, where his games are constantly being derailed? Is it that he's overworked as the DM and is getting burned out? Maybe you guys are playing every week and it's only one person that ever DMs. Maybe they want to actually be a player in the game at some point as well. They want to play their own characters and not just DM, but they're the only person willing to DM. And there's a lot of things that we don't know the answers to. But that being said, whenever there's a problem at the group should come together and discuss it and talk to each other. And hopefully you're playing with people that are your friends and you can work through these problems as friends, and with any kind of relationship, it can be complex, but communication is key.
We've had, questions, comments come in over the years and, even prior to us doing Nerdarchy, we've had issues at our own tables. And always the go-to thing is have a conversation, ask questions, and try to resolve it away from the gaming table. Like you can do it there, but not while you're gaming. Talk about it and see how you can seek a resolution. Because that is the first, and foremost response to any problem is talk it out. And if you can't seek resolution there, then you have to go in other directions.
Now, before we go any further, it might not always be a bad idea to start a new campaign. There is a Kickstarter for a new campaign going on right now that has my eye, and it would be really hard not to jump into that.
So we're going to segue over into the awesome sponsor for this particular video, and that is the Kickstarter for Humblewood from the people at Deck of Many, and there's a lot of great stuff going on that Kickstarter. The world in this Kickstarter is Everden, and it's primarily based off of, animalistic or anamorphic, animal races in the main book, you get 5 bird-like races that you can be able to play with. There is new magic items. There is new monsters. There's an adventure designed for low-level PCs. And, if you want to just take this and put it in a section of your world, or just use the races and magic items and monsters for your game, it's a great source of material.
If they hit the stretch goal, they're going to even unlock another 5 races, the humble folk.
Now, there's a lot of great add-ons, for this Kickstarter. So if you don't want to get the big bundles, you can still find a way to either get the dice, the pins. There's minis that you can get for these specific races. I know I got my eye on it because it looks really awesome.
So do us a favor, help out the channel by checking out the sponsors. You can find the link down in the description. All right, back into bad DM. And we mentioned, even in some of our own videos, we catch some flack. But because we bring up conversational pieces that we want to talk about, it doesn't necessarily mean that we eliminate these things from our games, and we like to compare them oftentimes to previous editions.
There's times that we ourselves, as much as people really enjoy watching our games, there's times that we slip into some of the old habits because we've been playing so long. I know I've had times where someone wanted to do something, it was part of the story, and I still had them make a roll. That's bad DMing right there, because what happens if he fails? The story gets held up because a roll was there. So you just need to move on and go through the situation, and as players, be a little bit more lenient when these kind of things come up.
So as I mentioned, there was a couple things that, a couple videos that we've done more recently that I want to point out. Overpowered race feature wrecking your Dungeons and Dragons game. And that's where we talk about dark vision and how it really eliminates some of the creepiness from the game. And there's definitely, some cause of bad DMing that for anyone that might have a problem with dark vision. So we like to do those kind of videos to discuss some of these things that could come up in your game and different ways you could deal with them. And, just because a particular GM has an issue with dealing with this problem, it doesn't make them a bad GM. Oftentimes, as GMs, they're making rulings on the fly, and they have to figure this out without disrupting your game and keeping things moving. And, sometimes, like Ted said, a bad call can happen, or they react really fast, so they don't have time to think about it. And like Ted said, maybe you should just cut them a little slack when that happens.
Sometimes we like to do videos where we want to get, the inspiration flowing. We want to get, the seeds of conversation started. And, that whole dark vision thing, that was one of them, because some DMs have been playing for so long, and back then most races didn't have the ability to see in the dark. You only had a fair few that are like, oh well, I can do this and I can do that, and it's changed the scope of the game. And sometimes I want you to be like, oh well, here's a problem, how do you deal with it? What is the solution? And these are fun video topics to go on, and it gets a lot of awesome interaction and comments from you great viewers out there.
Yeah, at this point in 5e, it's more rare for a race to not have dark vision than it is.
So we also had the Magic Made Easy button ruining D&D. And that was, there are so many spells that are out there that just change life in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. And things like, create food and water, but like, yeah, there's no need for a survivalist game because I got a cleric in the group, and first level spell solves that problem, no big deal. So these were things that it's another topic of, well, how do you get around, or how do you deal with this kind of a question?
Yeah, a lot of the utility spells in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons can completely shut down the exploration pillar, right? And so we thought it was a good topic to point out. And man, in that one, so many people were really quick to say, oh, if you can't deal with that as a dungeon master, you're a bad DM. And I just wonder how many of those people are actually dungeon masters themselves that make that claim. And so as we talk about these things and we bring them up, because for the most part, Nerdarchy really limits virtually nothing at our table when we actually play. So to us, it doesn't matter that much. But when we're talking about these topics, we like to bring them up and discuss them because other DMs might need a hand and they might want to think about these things when they come into their game and how they deal with them. And oftentimes, too, there's really helpful GMs and players that give suggestions in the comments to help these DMs. And that's ultimately what we're always looking for, instead of just going to accusing, the DM of being a bad DM because maybe they don't know how to deal with a particular problem that comes up in their game.
And Nerdarchy likes to help with advice, and there's loads of players and GMs out there who do come to Nerdarchy, watch our videos, to build themselves up, within the game. So while you might make that call as, oh, that's bad GMing, or, I already know how to deal with this problem, this video is not for me, and that's fine. There are sometimes a video might not be specifically pointed to you, but other DMs out there might need that advice. They might not have as much experience.
Also, it might just be a great opportunity for that GM or that person who doesn't think this video is for them to help out those other GMs, to weigh in and be like, well, this is how I would do it in my game, or this is how I look at problems like that. So they can take part in the conversation and help members in the community that might be struggling with those problems.
That's a really great point there, Dave.
All right, so let's start dissecting things a little bit. First of all, bad itself, that word is kind of a problem because bad can be very subjective.
What some people might consider, oh, this was a bad call, or that is bad DMing, is exactly how some other players might be seeking the game. I know I've gamed for all types. There's 3 different pillars of the game. Mine tends to focus more heavily on role playing or social and exploration, not so much on the combat. And I've had loads of players who come to my table, and they are combat-heavy players. So it's like, they're sitting there and they're, falling asleep or they're rolling their eyes, and it's like they just want the action. And I'm like, it's not always my focus. What are you going to do? So, in that case, that player might feel what I'm doing is bad DMing.
You bring up a great point, because I remember another game that was played in where the GM actually apologized because there was only one combat that happened at the very end of the gaming night.
Yep.
So, but that's fine because it's just a different style. There was nothing to apologize for. That's how the game played out. And some people just want that. So it's not a big deal.
That particular session changed my whole viewpoint on DMing, because that combat was literally a round and a half long, happened in less than 10 minutes. And I'm like, wow, we played for 4 hours, and, so much of it was just role playing. And, this was before I started watching any streamed games or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I can do a lot more with, my time at the DM seat than just let me put out combats.
There's 3 pillars. Why not explore them all? Sure. Next up, Ted, let's talk about the elephant in the room here, right? And that is the gaming group itself, the table itself, and how many players are actually at the table.
Right? That does make a difference.
If you have a GM and 5 players, how many players are at the table? It's a trick question because, some people view this 2 different ways, right? Some people will tell you there are 5 players and a GM.
Right.
Someone else might tell you, no, there's 6 players at the table. And we lean heavily in, there are 6 players at the table category.
This is one of those things that it is a really, it's a big problem out there, because a lot of players are like, well, that person is, choosing to GM and they're here to entertain me. And as crazy as it sounds, like, I'm sorry, it is a group game. It is a group storytelling, adventure game that everybody has to have fun. I as a GM, I am taking time, while you're off, doing other things, I'm going to have to be preparing material, thinking about what I'm going to do for tonight's session or next week's session, or whatever. you're not having to do any work. You might have to level up a character. Oh, I got to plan magic items. I got to plan encounters. I got to make NPCs. Some GMs go all out. They paint minis. They make terrain. And they prepare an adventure that's there for you. And if you're not willing to consider them a player after they're doing all of that, I'm sorry, but that's a problem.
It absolutely is, Ted. And, not only that, it puts all the onus on one player at the table. The other players are kind of getting off easy because they're just going to sit back, play the game, and then to top it off, if you're just willing to willy-nilly call the GM a bad DM for whatever reason, sure, there are definitely instances where bad DMing happens at the table. But it's not really bad DMing most of the time. Most of the time, it is just bad behavior from a player. It just so happens because this player is the DM, that the onus of, it's the DM, but it's usually not the problem. A lot of times the problem is the player, and you can have a problem player anywhere at the table. Obviously, it affects the game more when it's the DM, but problem players are, problems.
So this is going to bring up a really, a big point. If you feel that, all right, the person is just being a bad DM, or in your case, that player is not doing well for the game, and they are the GM, this asks a big question. Does it change your willingness to DM?
Well, and that's it. So when you have a lot of people that want to point their finger and accuse someone of bad DMing, does that stop other players from stepping up because now they're intimidated? One, no one wants to be called bad at anything, right? No one wants to get called out. But at the same time, we need new players to take that seat behind the screen and run the game. So if we are more encouraging and forgiving on our GMs, perhaps more people will step up and go to the other side of the screen.
So from that point, I know that at one point in time, I was reticent to step behind the screen. These the other guys I was playing with, Dave and, very former GM, Steve, they're like, look, we want to play, and we want to play together, because they were friends, before, the group was put together. And I didn't want it, but Dave was like, all right, I'm just going to shove you in the chair, kick you into it, and be like, look, I don't care how good or bad you do, you're DMing.
Well, here's the thing too, really important that I need to interject. That is before the internet, pretty much,
yes.
Right? Imagine if every time you went online, you hear people accusing these new GMs or GMs in general as being bad GMs, and then all of a sudden, maybe you didn't even think about, oh my God, I'm going to be a bad GM, or you're just nervous about sitting, behind the screen for the first time. But now you've been on the internet for years and years, and it's like, oh my God, you're like, you're like, the kid from Home Alone all of a sudden.
This was before the gaming industry really had any kind of settled presence, on the internet, more than 15 plus years ago. And, I'm glad that I was thrust into it, because it's something that to this day I really enjoy doing. I get to be the one to kind of create and share these awesome stories, but I only get to create starting points, and then as we all tell this story together, as we all come up with stuff, great things can happen. And the creative aspect of it is just such a love that I've developed over the years.
So I just want to say, as a DM, as a player, as someone who really loves bringing new people into the hobby and likes to see this hobby grow, I think as people, we should come together and we should support DMs more. And when you want to accuse someone of being a bad DM, instead, first, why don't you examine what they're doing and decide, one, are they a bad DM or are they just being a bad player, right? A bad person at the table. Two, can this be resolved with just having a conversation? Can the group come together and talk it out and discuss what they like and what they don't like? Openness, I find, in any kind of relationship is key with being very communicative towards one another.
In that communication, if it's a bad instance, a bad call, as a player, there shouldn't be a harm in asking, say, hey, can we do this instead? Instead of saying, look, all right, you won't allow me to play an Aarakocra because you don't allow flying. I want to play it because I like the concept of the race. I don't want the powers. Can I be an Aarakocra? and have my flying be replaced with something else. There's ways to have a give and a take and do it through a conversation. If things can't be resolved, well then, I apologize. And then in relation to you saying, well, that's a bad call. If you don't have a solution that's better than what the DM is saying, if you're not willing to step behind the screen, then just pull back on the reins and, maybe it'll be better next session.
So with that, what do you folks think? What do you think makes a good GM or a bad GM? We can discuss it down in the comments below. Do you encourage new GMs at the table? Have you taken up the GM role yourself? Or are you still a little hesitant? Let's discuss it down in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
On the way down there, don't forget to stop by the description and check out the link to the awesome Kickstarter for Humblewood.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.